Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So this is a video I've been wanting to make actually for years. Um, Everything that I talk about on this channel, as well as the blog, it really comes down to this question because, there's been, whenever I do this topic, on the video channel or whenever I've done it on the blog, there's always going to be a back and forth of how people see this. And I'm not here trying to impose my views, my personal views on anything. I'm just trying to provide the evidence, the context, and to present how people see things. Oftentimes when we look in the history of certain countries or whatever country that you might be researching, there could be things in a particular country's history that maybe a lot of people are not familiar with. I know I've come across that in my studies of the United States as well as Brazil. So there's always going to be things that, wow, I didn't know that. So today, of course, I'm going to be talking about, again, this whole question of, who's defined as black, white, who should be just seen as mixed. The term mulatto has been historically used in both the US and Brazil. Should the category known as pardo, meaning brown or mixed, should that be considered part of the black population or should it not? There's so many different ways to analyze this question. And what I want to do is I want to put some historical context behind some of the things that I've said. And I'm not saying this is going to actually change anybody's mind. That's not my point here, but I will show that there is historical context for some of the things that I've said and how I tend to look at the country. Okay, so today's video, I'm calling it white, black, mulatto. Did Brazil ever have something similar to the infamous one drop rule? The answer may surprise you. I want you to stick around for this video because I got a lot of stuff that I need to present to, basically like validate my argument. Okay. So before I get into this video, I'm trying to keep this. I don't want to keep anybody here for an hour, but I'm trying to get through this video as quickly as I can. But at the same time, there's so much that I need to go through, so I can just flesh out what I'm saying. So before I do that though, make sure you like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel and click on the notification bell. So you'll be one of the first people to know when I put up a new video. So let's get into the video for today. So I am going to be eventually reacting to a video because the video that I saw a few days ago, it kind of plays into what I'm talking about, but I'm going to expand much more on what this guy is talking about, as well as a lot of the commentary that I've seen on certain videos that I've posted in the past. So whenever you're talking about the question of race and color in Brazil versus the United States, there's always this question of Brazil never had a one drop rule. So in Brazil, somebody's color classification or race is going to be defined by what they look like, as opposed to in the United States, like there's been numerous cases over the years, for a while, of people who, for all intents and purposes, look white, but then because they have just one drop of black blood, like 4 or 5 generations back, they'll still be legally classified as black. So I want to first say that I don't. People have always accused me of saying, "Oh, you follow the one drop rule." Like, no, I can't say that I do at all. I see that it's, to me, it's ridiculous for you to define a person who, for all intents and purposes, looks white, but you'll define them as black simply because they had a great, 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 great grandmother or grandfather who was black. That's absurd. My classification of black is if I look at somebody and I can see beyond a reasonable doubt that this person is of African ancestry, then I see that person as black. Some people will see them as mixed. Some people, in Brazil, they use the term mestiço. They use the word pardo. Okay. And I'm not denying that. I mean, it's always going to come down to, okay, how do you define black? How do you define mixed? How do you define non-black? Okay. I'm going to show that there's a lot of similarities between the US and Brazil that people may or may not be aware of. Okay. That kind of blurs that idea that Brazil only goes by appearance and the United States only goes by ancestry. It's not quite that simple. So then we have to look at the terms, the popular color classification terms in Brazil. Pretos meaning black, pardos meaning brown or mixed, mulattoes meaning people mixed African European ancestry, Indios meaning Indians or Native Americans, Native Brazilians, if you prefer, and Brancos meaning white. So those are the most popular uh, color classifications that you have in Brazil. The question of should Pardos, the people who are considered brown or mixed race, should they be considered black? That's always been a question. You have people on the black side who say Pardos should just be part of the black population, the população negra, they say. Other people on the mestizo Pardo side says no, Pardos have no business in the black category. They're a different group. Okay, I'm somewhere in the middle on that category, and I'm going to explain why. When we talk about the question of Pardus versus mulattoes, the main difference that I see there is that a Pardu can be mixed of any category. You could be mixed Native American with white. You could, or European. You could be European and African. You could be European, African, Indian. You could be black and Indian mixed. Any type of mixture, a person can classify themselves as Pardu. Whereas with the term mulatto, that specifically speaks to persons who are African European mixture. So what I'm saying is, originally the term Pardo, as I said in a recent video, Pardo was really how the Portuguese define Indians, but later on it became to it it was an umbrella term for just anybody who's of whatever classification of mixture. You had historically that a lot of what they call pretos or clearly black people moving into the Pardo category, defining themselves as Pardo because they didn't want to be seen as preto because it was a pejorative term. So nowadays, almost anybody can be classified as a Pardo, right? If they're of whatever degree of mixture. Okay. Opinion. American standards of race have nothing to do with Brazil and are out of context for the Brazilian reality. I agree with that to a certain degree, but in other ways, that's not necessarily so. And that's what I'm going to prove in this article today. Take it or leave it. I'm using historical documents to expound upon what I'm saying. The popular saying, que passou escapou de branco preto é, which basically means he who cannot pass for white, he is black, which speaks against the idea of what most Brazilians would say. You guys in the United States, you only count as black and white. You don't have a mixed category because we do have a mixed category now. But it's long been argued that Brazil is completely different because of this mixed race category. And what I'm saying is, based on this particular saying that is, people know this saying. This is a saying that's been around for decades, maybe harken back to the slavery era. And a lot of people are familiar with this saying, he who cannot pass for white, he is black. Okay. That's not something I made up, and I'm going to show that. Black and mulatto are separate categories, but both are considered infected races or blood. So the way I see this is people are accusing me of saying, well, you're just putting everybody in the same category. So what I'm going to say is you can honestly say there is black and mulatto. I'm going to say that, and I accept that. But the point is how I see it, the way mulattoes are seen, and I'm going to show this how it happens in Brazil as well. They may be considered a subcategory underneath the black category because historically, both black and mulatto are both seen as infected races. And I'm going to prove that with historical evidence. So, and then the last thing I want to talk about is is there one standard of whiteness globally? And I'm going to argue that it's not. This for several reasons. When you look at the Arab situation, how are Arabs classified in the United States? It's funny because politically they're not supposed to be considered white, but then categorically they're oftentimes considered white. In Brazil, when you have persons of Middle Eastern ancestry, generally they're accepted as white. So do we have a full standard of what is white? I've already talked about when white Brazilians go to the United States and they're not necessarily classified as white, and they often run into shock because of that. I've done at least 2 videos that talk about that. So the video that I want to react to is something that I just saw a few days ago, and I think it speaks volumes to this issue of who's black in Brazil and who's white, who has problems coming to terms with being black. How do people really know when they're white? So let me just react to this video. I'm going to just overdub it right quick, and then I'm going to come back and do another reaction to what both of these guys are saying. You there who doesn't know if you're black or if you're white, what are you? Oh my God, colorism. Are you black, white root? You've never had these doubts. The white root, the whiteness, never looked in the mirror and said, am I black?
Ele falou, será, gente? Será que eu
He's never
sou?
had these doubts.
Eu
So
não
welcome
sei,
to the
nunca
group.
teve essas dúvidas. Então, bem-vindo ao grupo. Olha,
Look,
durante a
during
minha
my
formação como
formation as a
sujeito,
subject,
eu
I've
sempre
always heard
ouvia
that
que
whoever
passou de
can't
branco
pass
a
for
preto
white is
é.
black.
E eu
And I
assimilei essa parada como
assimilated
se
this
fosse
as if
verdade
it were
absoluta,
absolute
até porque é
truth
super simples e fácil de
because it's
entender
super
isso.
simple and easy to
Sendo que a gente não
understand.
pode
But we can't
reduzir a
reduce
questão
the
da identidade
question of
racial
Brazilian
brasileira
racial
dessa
identity in
forma.
this
É
way.
perigoso, por mais que não
It's
pareça.
dangerous,
E
even
por
if
conta
it
de
doesn't
diversos
seem so.
pontos.
One of them
Um
is the
deles é a
indigenous
perspectiva
perspective.
indígena. Ao tratar
By
isso dessa
treating it
maneira,
by
contribuiu
treating
com o
it this
apagamento dessa
way, it
identidade.
has
E para além
contributed to the
disso,
erasure
a
of
gente
this
não
identity.
pode
And beyond that, we
disseminar a
can't spread
falsa
the
ideia de
false
pureza
idea of
racial
white racial
branca.
purity.
Não podemos
We can't
validar que
validate that
uma
a person
pessoa
is
é
less
menos
white or no
branca ou
longer white
deixa de
because they
ser
have a
branca
certain
por
trait.
ter determinado traço.
A blonde,
Uma pessoa
light-eyed,
branca, loira,
green-eyed
de olho
white person
claro,
is
de olho
no
verde,
whiter
não é
than a
mais
white
branca que
person
uma
with
pessoa
curly hair.
branca de cabelo
They're
crespo.
both white. There is
As
no
duas são
real way to be
brancas. Não
white.
existe uma forma de ser
That's the
branco de
genist
verdade.
imagery,
Isso é um
which should
imaginário
have died
genista
out
que
in the
deveria ter
last
morrido no
century.
século passado.
So
Então,
real
branco de
white,
verdade,
whiteness,
brancura,
we have
o
to be
que a gente
careful
quer
with
dizer
this
com isso?
discourse as to not
Devemos tomar
reinforce these
cuidado com esse
stereotypes
discurso
and this
para não
false idea
reforçar
of
esses
white racial
estereótipos e
purity,
essa falsa
which
ideia de
doesn't
pureza
exist.
racial branca que não existe.
So you heard what they had to say. People still have an issue of how they fall in the color classification and how they fall on the racial scale. And that's obvious in Brazil because you find so many people who are on the border. Like, okay, they're too white to be black, they're too black to be white. And you have this confusion. And he also spoke on the point of originally the category of Pardu. And I've said this before, I've had to move my own position because I know that we can't classify all Pardus as black because some of those Pardus are beyond racial classification. And also some of those Pardus have more of an indigenous look than an African look. So I totally agree with that. It gets to be problematic when all of the Pardus are in this group. Now, if we were to look at this from a United States perspective, it would be almost like mixing the black with the Latino population. And we know that some Latinos have a more black look. So then definitely there's a couple of things going on here. We can't throw all Pardos and classify them all as black or negros, as they would say in Brazil. Also, the question of what classifies a person as white? As I've said, do we judge Brazilian white by Brazil standards? Because a lot of white people in Brazil are actually just light-skinned mestizos or light-skinned persons of mixed race. They come to the United States and whatever degree of whiteness they have, they'll be classified as Latino or Brazilian. Some people will see Hispanic because they don't know that Brazilians speak Portuguese. So there's no real one clear-cut question or response for this. How do we define white? How do we define black? That's what the question is here. We've seen over the years how people who may not have been classified as white are actually white as well. I mean, we talk about in the United States, the Irish, the Italians, Jewish people. In reality, there was really no question of whether these people were white or not. They were never they never had laws that, kept them out of the white category the way that blacks were. So they may be considered lower, in terms of like a subcategory within whiteness or a hierarchy. Maybe it'd be better for me to say that these people would be grouped in a hierarchy, but they all belong in the white side. So what I'm saying is that for me, I think a solution would be the fact that we have white people in Brazil who look clearly white, and then you have people who you can look and see these people clearly have some type of racial mixture. It's the same with the black category. I don't have a problem with that. You have the same thing with the indigenous ancestry. Okay. You got people who look more indigenous, they fall a little bit more to the white side. So in reality, to me, this would straighten the whole thing out. If we can accept that there's a plethora of different looks among white people, people with blue, green eyes, blonde hair, then you have people who have red hair, who have blonde hair. Some people have, pretty dark skin to be white, and then you have people with very pale skin. When it comes to the white person, that person is classified as white. So why is it that we can't accept that people can have African features or definitely prominent black features and still be considered black, even if they have some degree of mixture? We see this everywhere around the world. Race mixture is nothing new. So with all of this in mind, generally we talk about how everyday Brazilians see this, but what does the historical say? What do Brazil's historians say about this question of pardo, mulatto, preto, negro in Brazil? Because if you just listen to the everyday person, it's going to say these are all completely different categories. The Movimento Negro, Brazil's black rights organizations, they have always said brown and black goes in the same category. I'm disagreeing slightly because I'm going to say Within that Pardue Brown category, you have people who are clearly not black. They're on the cusp of whiteness or they have indigenous features. I'm just saying we can't say how many black people there are in Brazil because there's just no way with so many mixed people going on, just how many people are black enough that we would consider them black. But what does the historical context say? Is United States the only place that implemented this type of one drop rule? You might be surprised at what we find in the history. So I have a lot of stuff that I want to cite here. First of all, this is historian Petronio Jose Dominguez, and I'm going to be reading liberally from his book. It's called Uma História Não Contada, Negro Racismo e Branqueamento em São Paulo no Pós-Abolição, which you can translate as a untold history, Black racism and whitening in Sao Paulo in post-abolition. Okay, so what I'm going to read now comes directly from that book. I just translated some. It just applies to everything I'm talking about. So, let me just go ahead and read these pages that I found. I bought this book years ago, so just listen to some of the quotes in this book. The concept of blood purity supported by the church from the Middle Ages into the 19th century prevented Black people from occupying any relevant role in Brazilian social life because, in the view of the masters of power, they were carriers of impure or infectious blood. This was racial discrimination of a theological nature. In order to know the origin of individuals, various civil and religious institutions adopted the criterion of investigating the candidate's life up to the fourth generation. If there was any drop of impure blood in the family tree, the candidate was eliminated because the Jew, the mulatto, the Black, and the Moor are considered, quote unquote, contaminated races, tainted by infectious blood that makes them unfit for the exercise of religious profession. It is interesting to note that the blood cleanliness test, introduced in colonial Brazil, generated a model of racial discrimination based on skin color and blood. This means that the basis of racial discrimination against Black people was not exclusively the degree of pigmentation of the individual's skin, but also their origin. Invalidating the current explanation of colonial Brazil as a hell for Blacks and paradise for mulattoes, historian Charles Boxer found that racial restrictions also affected mulattoes to the point where they were forbidden to carry weapons, wear fancy clothes, and occupy high positions in the church and the state. In 1680, for example, the Pardus were expelled from the schools run by the Jesuits. The Portuguese crown in 1621 determined that no Black, mulatto, or Indian, even if freed, could learn the trade of goldsmith or exercise it. When 4 people had to be appointed to positions in the public administration in the state of Bahia in 1715, the crown ordered that the nominees should all be white men free of infectious blood. In 1713, the town council of Sao Paulo decreed a royal order, according to which no Black Carijo, meaning Guarani Indian, or mulatto, may use firearms, neither short nor long, under penalty of having them taken as lost and ... days in prison as it seems to me. In a royal charter dated July 20th, 1809, Prince Regent João ordered the formation of militias in the captaincy of the state of Rio Grande do Sul. Paragraph 4 of Article 6 of the instructions stated, all militiamen will be taken from the white class, and those whose great-grandparents were not Black and whose parents were born free will be considered as such. This legal definition of Black, according to Jose Honorio Rodriguez, was the same as the one in force in the United States today, i.e., 1/8 of Black blood was enough to decide an individual's Blackness. So listen to what all of that is saying. This is a clear documentation of the legalities of keeping Black and mulatto people out of certain positions within the military, civil service, and the church. So as the Brazilian historian Rodriguez says, this categorization of Blackness, defining one as 1/8 of Black blood, determining somebody as Black, he defined that as being equal to the one drop rule in the United States. So all I'm saying here is that Historically, we cannot say that this type of rule never existed in Brazil because it's been documented. It's been documented that blacks and mulattoes up to a fourth generation back could be barred from certain positions in society. Now, I'm not arguing that this uh, classification was something that the lay people, just everyday Brazilians, would know about, but it is there in the books. This is what the proof is. So when people tell me, well, you're trying to classify Brazilians according to American standards, like, no, I don't do that. The point is, Brazil has its own record of generalizing, of classifying somebody as black, or if you prefer black and mulatto, back to how many generations did it say? 1/8 of black blood. So that's not me saying that. This is not me applying simply an American standard to what happened in Brazil. You can't do that. Brazilians don't see it that way. The general population, I would say that's true. But the point is, this has been documented. It says right here, 1/8 of black blood would, eliminate somebody from having certain positions in society. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but that's how I see that. It is equal to the United States one drop rule. Just because everybody doesn't know about it doesn't mean it's not in the history books. We have it from the 17th century, the 18th century, and this is the proof. So don't look at me and say you're putting this out of context according to American standards. Like, no, Brazil had its own standards. Now, just because the general population doesn't know that this is true doesn't mean that this is erased from the history books. So when I did a book, when I did a video, let me see here, which video was it? This video that I did just last week, and I went through some statistics that showed that in general, pretos and pardos are in the same social economic category. They have the same disadvantage vis-a-vis the white population. So that's why the Movimento Negro has categorized both groups that should be considered black. As I'm saying, I would never say all pardos are black, but there is a large percentage of pardos who should be considered black. Those people we consider to be mulattoes. And I don't mean just a mulatto just from somebody who's a first generation mix of a white and a black person, because mixing in Brazil has been going on for a long time. I'm talking about people who you can visibly see them having African ancestry, regardless of their skin color, right? So I wanted to lay the foundation for that, but then there's more. I'm going to go into these excerpts from dissertation, theses, and books. This first one is from a dissertation by Evelyn Mayo da Silva. It's called Black Popular Education, a study from the relation of Black youth with the jungle in Morro da Serrinha. I'm not sure where that's located. But listen to what she says here in her dissertation. Then the speaker asked me why I had stood up. I said I was black, and he asked me how I knew that. I replied that my grandmother always told me that passo de branco preto é, meaning whoever can't pass for white is black. That's when he continued. You see, in this auditorium, more than 80% are black and only one teenager stood up. I want to give her a round of applause. So they're talking about what they're saying here. This girl quoted this citation, this saying that her grandmother used to say to her. So it's clear. You can find this phrase all over the internet. People are familiar with this phrase. Who can't pass for white is considered black. So again, I don't have to bring my Americanisms into this point when there is a historical context among what the people say and what the historical records are saying. Okay, let's go into the next one. Fernando Henrique Cardoso was once president in Brazil from 94 to 2002, but before he got into politics, he was actually a sociologist. So I took this from that book. His book, Capitalism and Slavery in Meridional Brazil, Blacks in Slaveholding Society in the state of Rio Grande do Sul from 1962. Rio Grande do Sul being one of the 3 southern states in Brazil. So this Cardoso's book is from 1962. Listen to what he says. In this context, the mulatto appeared as a black man who was both privileged and stigmatized by the double condition of race defector and parvenu. In fact, all the ambiguity of the black situation was revealed in the lighter shade of the skin of the mestizos, or persons of mixed race. As long as the status order was in full force, the rules of social exclusion defined the position of the mulatto in fairly categorical terms in Rio Grande do Sul. Again, he who escaped from being white is black. That's what it says here. Escapo do branco é negro. Again, this is not Marcus saying this. This comes out of the historical records where people were saying, look, if you can't pass for white here, we're just going to consider you black. Now, whether you consider yourself pardo or mulatto, we consider you part of the black group. That's not me saying that. So again, it's not Marcus that's putting this in the context of the American standard. This is what the historical records are saying. To me, this kind of proves or gives us an example of why it seems that black and brown in Brazil are in the same social economic category, no matter what the category is. Okay, let's go to one more. This is a study from 2019. It's called Race, Media, and Youth, Representations of Black Youth from 2019. This is what the signified notion of race has allowed and is allowing: a demystification and valorization of the color black and consequently of the black subject. In this respect, soul singer Chimaya was quite convincing when he said that passo de branco preto é, meaning whoever can't pass for white is black. There's no such thing as mulatto. Mulatto to me is the color of a mule. As such, there is no middle ground because, as demonstrated at times when the tension of colors refers to conflicts, the mestizo pardo, the brown mixed person, is seen as black. So let's understand. Chimaya is considered Brazil's greatest singer. He was a soul singer in the 70s and he went a little pop in the 80s and 90s. But Chimaya was known for his controversy. So not only did Chimaya say this, but in a video that I did before about another soul singer in Brazil named Tony Tornado, both of them are saying none of this mulatto stuff. You're either black or you're white. So we can't just say, okay, I'm the American that's imposing American standards on Brazil when we have context of people believing in this in everyday discourse, the sayings that people will say, if you can't pass for white, then you are black. Okay. We have the historical records that say civil, religious, and military positions discriminated against people all the way back to about 4 generations back of having an African ancestry. So to me, this kind of changes the game. In a way, it does not, because it doesn't mean that everyday Brazilians are going to go by this rule. And I'm not saying that they should. I'm just saying that we can no longer say, I've known this because some of this information I did in an article like maybe 15, 16 years ago. And I decided to pull it out today because this is what I'm saying. The things that people are saying in the comment section is saying, oh, you're trying to impose your American beliefs on the Brazilian situation that's out of context. And I'm saying that's not true. And this is what the history reports are saying. This goes back all the way back to the 17th century. Okay. So this is how we have to look at it. I'm not saying it's up for anybody to define themselves according to what they see fit, but I am just saying there is a historical context of grouping black, brown, mulatto into the same group. Okay. That's all I wanted to get across here. Wanted to know what you think about this. I mean, maybe what I'm telling you now is not going to matter to anybody, and that's fine. All I'm here to do is just show this does have a historical context in Brazil, even if it's among just the sayings that people have, but it goes back to the 4th generation of you having African ancestry that says we can discriminate against you and bar you from these civil organizations, religious and militia. So it is what it is. This is not what the Americans said. These are all Brazilian sources. You know, I quoted all of the sources there. You're free to go online and find up these sources yourself if you can read Portuguese. So anyway, I just wanted to leave that here. Let's get a conversation going. I know a lot of people are going to have a lot to say about this, but I'm just saying the record speaks for themselves. Definitely drop a comment in the comment section. Like this video, share this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Click on that notification bell so that you know when I put up new videos. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post.